Thank you very much for joining us, Warren. It's very kind of you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
You're very sweet. Thank you. If you don't mind, could you give people that are listening an introduction to your background and how you entered the entertainment industry, and then maybe you could tell us a little about Producer Capital Fund and why you decided to launch that company.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the business for almost 15 years. I moved to Los Angeles to be an actor and had some business and marketing experience under my belt when I went to Los Angeles. So, I did not wait tables. I got a job at a post-production facility and was hired on as director of marketing in sales for this company in Hollywood. And it gave me the opportunity to learn the film business, which I, didn't really have much or any experience in the business of film. But this gave me an entree into the business and gave me the opportunity to learn it in a sense backwards from post-production. And from there, I grouped up with some friends and we started, making short films and which led to feature films. Working in the post-production facility gave me a really strong background and backbone in the business that I do now. So since then, I started making movies, was meeting directors in the post-production facility that were in the facility to finish their films, but I was getting the chance to meet a lot of directors and started working with a few different directors. I think they got a sense of my business and my skill set, and one particular director asked me to come on to his next picture and help him produce. So that was kind of my entree into film, and which led me to become a UPM in the Directors Guild, and I became a professional in physical production, and then which led me to learn the film finance side, which is obviously an important aspect if you want to make movies.
It seems like a lot of people who are very successful in running capital funds tend to be people with a very strong background in as a UPM and or a very strong background working as a post-production supervisor, because they sort of understand the process from soup to nuts of getting something from a page onto a screen and then out to audiences, which is there's a whole there's quite a lot of steps in that process. So
there are
exactly. Can you talk a little about when you launched the Producer Capital Fund? Can you talk a little about sort of why you decided to start it, and then what the Capital Fund does now?
Absolutely. I learned the business of film finance by making movies and learning what to do, what not to do. And there's generally three different components in a film finance structure, and that's typically starts with equity, and then there's an opportunity to create collateral through pre-sales, which will allow you to take on debt against that collateral. And then, like most independent movies and studio movies, they're taking advantage of tax credits and going to a state where there's incentives to go to that state and produce a movie. And there's an opportunity again to lend against those tax credits to give the filmmaker the necessary capital to be able to make their movie in advance of creating that credit or receiving that credit from the state. Mm-hmm. So Producer Capital Fund was created specifically to help filmmakers, complete their financing after they've found the most difficult part, which is the equity. Mm-hmm. So Producer Capital Fund is purely, really in layman terms, it's a lender in the film business and providing loans against pre-sales mm-hmm. And tax credits.
So you're basically sort of content agnostic, within basically you'll lend against any film that can actually get a state to say that they're going to give a particular production tax credits or incentives, for
the most part, we want to make sure that the team that's producing the picture has experience. It's not their first rodeo per se. and they understand, what is required when delivering a movie. We like to see bonds. They're not necessarily required. There's other things we'll put in place to protect the loan if there is not a bond. And typically it starts with the accountant and the line producer. And we'll, and I don't know how much we should get into it right now, but we would typically cash flow in tranches, generally three different tranches. As the production spends, we'll cash flow monies, secured against the tax credit that they're creating.
You're answering exactly the questions that I wanted to make sure that we went through. So I have sort of set of steps that I tell people they should basically go through when they're developing and packaging a project, because in my experience what happens is people have a very nebulous idea of development and packaging, and so they don't know what they should be spending their time or money on. So they do things like they go and they shoot a film with no budget, and then they think it has no budget and the quality control is not good, and there's all kinds of problems with the intellectual property in terms of not having the right releases or whatever. And then they think, well, this is my stepping stone to being able to produce, I can make $1 million off this film, and then I'll go make my next film. And so what I try to do is try to explain the sort of the process by which, you go, like maybe you do film analytics to find out whether or not the film that you're planning to produce even is likely to be worth the price of producing it, So would it be okay if we sort of swiftly move through that set of steps so you could tell people whether or not that set of steps seems to be what you think they should do, or whether or not you would make other suggestions? Because I think that roadmap makes it a lot easier for people to... Yeah. All right, cool. So the first step I'd usually tell people to do is determine the project viability and their basic cost of producing a film. So I tell them to acquire a script, and then get good coverage from multiple readers. And I personally use, and I have tried a selection, I've used WeScreenplay.com, because I can get 5 readers for about $350, and I like the fact that they've got this whole platform that does statistical analysis on the reader feedback, so that if you have like every so often you get kind of crazy readers that score everything hard or say everything's wonderful, and their back-end platform makes that not happen. And also they provide a bio on each reader, which, because I'm a producer and I'm going to include a lot of times the coverage with the script, I think it's nice to have a bio of who said what. So I do, right? So I acquire the script, get good coverage from multiple readers, then run film analytics for the film, like using a company like thenumbers.com or there's a million companies that do film analytics. And just so you have a sense then that whether or not a film is going to be something that's likely to make $10 million in distribution, or $1 million or $2 million in distribution, because that gives you a sense for how big the budget can possibly be. Then engage a UPM to do a budget in a day of days, so you can actually day out of days, so you can actually see if the budget and the film forecast match up. Then attach a casting director, attach a sales rep or producer's rep, or if you can do without them, but if you feel comfortable approaching distributors to see whether or not you can find somebody who's willing to give you a minimum guarantee based upon the UPM and the genre and the cast that you think you want to attach. So do those sound like the things that you would do if you were developing a project to determine its viability in the earliest stages?
Yeah, Nancy, I think that's a great way to do it. I think there's no, one way to skin the cat. And, and in film, if it was easy as, plugging in analytics and figuring out how to make money in this business, I would be doing it all day long. It's such a moving target, unfortunately, that there's so many unknowns. But I think, getting coverage is very important. I think speaking to as many sales agents as you can, typically, starting with international sales agents. If it's a script you like, and assuming you're, producing an English language movie, getting some feedback from an international sales agent, I think, is very important. I think the market is moving and changing all the time. So the demand is changing. And I think, talking to the people that are closest to the buyers and talking to the buyers, the most frequently is probably your best move. Because they may surprise you. You may have an award-winning horror film in your hands, and internationally, horror is not doing anything right now, and that may be a huge surprise to you. So that may, you may change paths and go with a thriller, or if they say, family adventures, the movies that has a huge demand, then maybe you want to, go that way. I think it's important to believe in a project, and passions, drives everything, but you can't be too close to a project that you don't see what other people or hear what other people are telling you.
Right.
So talking to as many people as you can is a really good idea. Identifying the type of properties that buyers are looking for is another great idea. And then when you do that, getting the best director you can. It helps if the writer's proven. It's not necessary. It helps you. It helps you if the director is proven. Not necessary, but it helps you. It makes it easier. When I say proven, they've made movies before that were well received, or, better, they have a film has a theatrical success under its belt. Not necessary, but it helps. Then once you have those components, you want to go, get the biggest actor you can. And that's where talking to a sales agent is going to really help you, because you may think, actor A, wow, he was a major movie star. He shows up in everything. He definitely has value. Well, he may not have value, because even though you have to pay him $1 million, he may not have any value. He may not drive much. He may drive sales in certain territories, but not even come close to recouping his fee. So you have to be very weary of what you think without talking to other people. And I think that's probably the biggest, the market is moving, and it's kind of like the stock market. It's changing all the time, and you just don't know. So you have to hedge your bets, and getting the hottest actor, the biggest actor, is really typically a very good play. It doesn't guarantee success, but it hedges the risk.
Right. Well, and I think one of the reasons that I recommend that people get film analytics is because it's something you can spend $500 on or $1,500 on if you're really getting excited. And then if you're like, I usually work with Bruce Nash at The Numbers, and one of the things that he does, which is interesting, is that he actually provides you with a list of distributors, and you can actually ask him. Based on the last year in your particular genre, who were the actors that were featured, and you can correlate that with the film for the kinds of films that you're doing. And it's not it's not a replacement by any means for having.
No, I think it's an added value.
Right.
Sure.
And the other thing is the fact that you're getting that information given to you. If you're getting that information from a film analytics company that works directly with the major studios, and also with the large with the people that are doing independent film like Blumhouse and so forth, the fact that you're getting the information from those folks means that you can, when you include it in your package, because you're talking to investors, at least you can point to something and go, to the extent that there's an expert in this industry, these guys seem to be good. And especially from people that are just coming in, getting access to and being able to chat with sales agents and producers rep and getting them to run numbers is not the easiest thing. I think for your second, third, or fourth film, once you've had a chance to meet those folks, it's easy, but it's really hard that when people are working on their first film, they just really don't have the access in most cases. I mean, that's my experience, is that if you call up, when you contact, if you contact a distributor and you say, I've got this director attached, this UPM attached, and I got film analytics that say this is a pretty hot film, I'd like to send this over to you and get your thoughts. Usually they will take the package, but if I try to contact them before I have those elements, I never have luck with them wanting to take the package, because they're like, I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about this project, and I don't know why I would waste my time looking at it. But if I have any kind of documentation that indicates that I'm actually producing a rational film, they seem pretty willing to just give me their thoughts. And they may say, you know, my numbers don't agree with yours, in which case I have a heads up that there's a problem, you know, because they do have later information.
Right, right. You know, and talking to, no, I agree with you. And talking to sales agents, you know, and having sales agents cover the script, but also run numbers based on, you know, certain cast, you know, I think is a good move. It gives you an idea that, you know, you don't want to go make a $10 million movie if the movie is only worth $2 million in the foreign market. That's just not going to work. So it's a good exercise.
It is. And I also think that it makes it so that your likelihood of really tanking something really badly, you know, it really comes down to risk reduction all the way across the board. The reason you have a good director is because he knows how projects are supposed to go. A solid UPM knows how, you know, DGA, UPM knows how things are supposed to go. They know how much things are supposed to cost. So it's, no one's probably going to die on your set, you know, and all of those things translate into a project that's less risk. And those things, and the film analytics and getting the numbers on from sales reps are in that same genre. You're just trying to make sure that you're in the ballpark of something that can be successful. That's how I think that's how you get something like The Purge or Paranormal Activities. The very first versions of those movies, they were done competently, you know, so it put them sort of in the right ballpark. So the next thing I sort of wanted to ask is, when people are coming to you for finance because you're a lender, you actually care a great deal about the crew and talent, the talent in terms of in front of the camera, but you also care a great deal about the key crew as well. Like, do you care who the DP is, or do you just figure if somebody's got a good director, then the DP and UPM are enough to tell you whether or not a project is going to do okay?
No, we definitely look at, you know, the department heads and the key components of the film, the director of photography, the production designer, you know, the first AD. We want to know who that is. You know, the players responsible for driving the movie and delivering, you know, a good-looking film.
Right. Do you want people to come to you when they have actually attached those people, or do you want them to come when they've got letters of intent, so that if somebody has to be pulled, you can go ahead and have them pull them out? Yeah,
it's not necessary to have someone have the department heads attached at that stage. You know, outside of the director and key producers, line producer, those are the most important, you know, factors, I think, for us starting off. But you know, we're attracted by cast. I mean, you know, I'd be lying if I said we weren't interested in the projects and being involved in projects that have a chance, that are star driven, that are good scripts.
When you say cast, do you think it makes sense? One of the people that you haven't mentioned in this conversation is casting, a casting director, and I think you can attach a casting director often for $2,000 to $3,500 in order to give you lists of names that you take to the distributor. And I've heard it said, actually, Bruce Nash from The Numbers said, you know, there's a couple of because they do analytics on all, not just on the films and how they perform, and the production companies and how they perform, but actually on every sort of individual on a project. Like, they can sort of tell you the great UPMs, if, you know, for any particular genre. But one of the things he does is he says, I'm surprised at how often you'll see the same casting directors coming up on the sort of the little shows that go big. He says, and I think it's because the casting directors those casting directors somehow have a talent for getting the right people into the right show. So do you think it makes sense to bring a casting director on board, or do you think that the sales reps and producers reps have a better feel for who's selling and who's not?
No, I mean, I think, you know, if you can attach a quality casting director onto your project, it's only going to help you. Really? It's only going to help you. I think it's added value, especially if you don't have personal relationships with the agents or with particular talent. it's a great way to legitimize your property or your project and get access and get exposure. I think I've, typically it's going to cost more than $3,500 if you're going to go for a casting director that delivers, top tier talent. I think you should be prepared.
I don't think it would be top tier talent.
Yeah.
Most of the people, I should mention that because I didn't tell you this at the beginning. Most of the people that come to my events are usually doing their first or second real film, and they're sort of doing $1 to $10 million films. So they're not probably going to.
Right. Then you can make that happen with $3,500. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great. It's money well spent.
Very cool, and that does make it so that when you see the project, you go, okay, I have faith that these people have.
It looks more real, right? And I think the casting director will do a breakdown and use breakdown services and release it to the industry, and it's a great way to get interest from different agents and agencies. It's a great way to solicit that.
Very cool. And then, so I guess the next question I have is in terms of corporate structure, you want every single film to be its own its own single purpose entity, its own C Corp, right? Or
typically an LLC.
Okay, you put it into an LLC, and then do you the equity investors have come on with a private placement memorandum and they've signed the subscription agreement. You want to see all of those docs as well to make sure that the legal stuff is in order, and it indicates that you'll be recouping when in the process.
Correct. We definitely require a CAMA, a collection account management agreement, which is serviced by a third party, typically a company called Freeway or a company called Vintage House. Basically, this is a way to have a collective agreement that all parties are privy to, including if it's a DGA and if it's obviously it's a SAG movie, they are party to the agreement so that a residual reserve is set aside from the top. The CAMA takes a minimal service fee. Your sales agent will be tied into that, and it'll define the sales agent's terms, whether they're taking 10% in the international market, and they're defining their market costs, and then the debt will be recouped after that. So there'll be payment directives for any pre-sales to the debt typically, and then the equity and anyone else who owns the movie. So everybody that's involved in the picture from an ownership perspective would be defined in that large 80-page agreement. But we require that, and that's very typical when you're making movies for the international marketplace.
That makes total sense. So and usually the debt people get their money paid back first because they don't have the kind of tremendous upside that an equity investor might have. So if the movie Purge, for example, had gotten had debt financing to monetize minimum guarantees or to monetize incentives and rebates, then the people that gave them that upfront money based upon that probably got paid out before probably.
Correct.
Like they got paid out. They didn't get paid out their money before the distributor because the distributor takes the money, and they may not have gotten it before the sales agent, but they probably did get it before any equity money got paid out to the producers or to the producers and the equity investors. So I think a lot of times people don't realize when people get their money back, right? People don't realize that debt usually gets paid before equity as a rule.
Yeah, that's right. So if the movie does $100 million at the box office, the debt, typically does not participate in that windfall. It gets its money back plus a finance fee that's been agreed upon. If it's a tax credit loan, the tax credit typically falls outside of the CAMA, the collection account we were previously discussing in the international market, because we'll just have an assignment of rights where when that tax credit comes in, the producer of the production just passes it over to us. And we carve out that piece of financing and, typically can get paid back faster than we would on a senior debt piece that was secured against pre-sales.
Very cool. That's very, very interesting. And obviously you need to see if somebody's got a minimum guarantee, if they want it monetized through you, then they have to provide that information. But you also want to see minimum guarantees even if you're not being asked to monetize them? Like, in other words, if the film comes to you and it's got any distribution in place, then that's important to you as well.
We want to see those agreements, which, typically we'll do it through a Dropbox, and it's very easy, and the producers will have everything organized, and they'll have their equity, financing in a folder. They'll have all their minimum guarantees or, their international commitments that they have. If they have a domestic deal, they'll have that in the folder. They'll have a budget, a schedule, one-liner, day-to-day, as you talked about. The CAM won't be set up at that time. We'll set that up mutually when, later in the game when the deal's happening. If there's a writer director agreement or any actor agreements in place, we want to see those. If there's, we want to see the whole package. Whatever your package is, we want to see it if we're going to entertain it.
Very cool.
If that makes sense.
So just out of curiosity, what size films do you usually have approaching you? Like our folks are usually doing 1 million to 10 million. I think, 5 million. I would say 3 to 5 million is pretty common.
Absolutely. I've personally made movies. So, I'm a producer that makes movies, and goes on location and oversees the film, manages the film. I do that work. And then on the flip side, I work as an executive producer where I may just fly in for a few days and visit the set. So there are two different worlds and two different lives that I'm living, right? So from a physical production standpoint, I've done movies from $150,000 to $30 million and everything kind of in between. Now, from a EP, we've been focused, Producer Capital Fund has been focused on, movies that are I'd say 1.5 to $12 million. So if you had a $3 million tax credit on that $12 million film, that's that's a big deal for us. We can do that deal, but that's kind of at the outer edge. A lot of the deals we do, ideally we do the tax credit. We want that piece of business, but then we'll do a combo deal where, it's a tax credit and a senior loan. And the senior loan, is collateralized against pre-sales. We don't like to do deals where a producer comes to us and says, I've got this awesome movie. He's got these stars, these names in it. Here's our sales agent, and here are our sales agent's estimates.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of times, oh, we don't want to do any pre-sales because we don't want to shortfall, we don't want to, short the value of the movie. Well, that's not smart. You want to do some pre-sales so you can test the waters. You'll get a lender that way to help you, complete your budget, but you want to test the waters. You want to make sure the sales agent is hitting their numbers. They're going to give you sales estimates. And for everyone that on the phone call that hasn't seen them, they're going to be asks, an ask column. That's the high number. That's what we want. Right. And then there's takes. That's like what we're willing to take. And we want to make sure that we're hitting those takes. We want to see if they can hit an ask. We want to see if we're in the middle and the mids. We want to know, it doesn't help just to create sales estimates that aren't right, that aren't correct or accurate or in the ballpark.
Right.
So we will not do a deal that the producer says, well, we just don't want to sell any territories right now because the movie's too valuable. Well, I think that's nonsense. Right.
And I think so too. I think it's kind of like, if it's that valuable, then you can go ahead and sell a territory. I mean, it's like, I mean, seriously.
or use your own money.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the beginner mistakes, I think, is one of the ones you just talked about, is when people think that they take sales agents and I have a background in sales and marketing, and I love salesmen because they're like the easiest people to sell things to. They're really just open-minded people, I find. But the problem is that they also tend to be the kind of people who think very highly of themselves, and they've had success in the past. They're kind of indomitable. So I find that they tend to be very optimistic people. So it really isn't until you actually get them to actually sell something and you get the money, but the asks back, or you get to see what they come in with, that you've got an actual deal. So trusting sales agent numbers is always, I think, a little on the dodgy side, which is one of the reasons I recommend they do the film analytics, because analytics people are not the least bit optimistic about anything. So
right.
It's like, who can you find who's really grim? Because they'll be good. Do you have any other mistakes that you think people sort of make that get them in sort of particularly hot water, that make it so they create a film that can't be sold, or they create a film that makes it so that it's going to be almost impossible for them to do another film?
Yeah, I think maybe attaching talent before you've kind of gone through the steps of talking to people. You may be so excited because you just landed some actor that you didn't expect to land, but that actor may not have any value, or he may have had value 5 years ago, or so I think that could be a mistake. There's certain actors that will kind of taint your movie and give your movie kind of like a B or a C type feel. And even if it's kind of a household name, it could hurt your movie in the long run. So I think you have to be wary of that. Aligning yourself with people that are proven and that are delivering, I think, is important. Casting director, the producers that you're working with, line producer, UPM, the director obviously is the most important thing. Everything's script and director, and then talent.
Right, and then
there's no one way to make a movie. So
right, I mean, I think
it's a moving target.
I think it's also, and different projects have different kinds of rules. You could probably cast anybody in Harry Potter 10. It wouldn't really matter. People are going to go see. It's got a market, so that'll be happening. Because the underlying property has value. But on the other hand, if you have Star Trek's kind of the same way. You can see people you've never seen in a Star Trek movie because they don't have to be well known, because it's a Star Trek movie, so the brand is going to carry the film. But if you're putting out a new film, you do have that problem of the star is going to be the thing that's well known because the property is not well known. Do you like to see a marketing budget included in the actual film budget, so that when you can be sure that when the film launches, like if people have like a $50,000 inside their $3 million budgets that's set aside for doing an EPK and which is an electronic press kit, a good website and so forth, and to do marketing when the film is actually available. Do you like to see that included in the budget, or is it just immaterial to you because $50,000 just doesn't matter when you're talking about $3 million?
Yeah, I mean, I think any extra money is a good thing. It's not something that we require. Our money is secured against the closed sales and the tax credit. So we're typically out and want to be out before the movie's distributed.
Oh,
when
cool.
It's delivered, we get out.
Cool. So from your standpoint, if it's in there, it doesn't really matter, but because you're going to be out before, you hope to be out when the rebates come in and when minimum guarantees get paid out. So given your background, when you're producing projects, if you're producing an independent film, do you include a marketing budget and a marketing strategy as part of it, or do you just go ahead and assume that the distributor is going to do their job when it comes to producing?
Yeah, it depends on your access to capital. And the viability of the project. Unfortunately, I think the majority of independent films, they don't do that because they're working so hard to get the money to make their movie. And every penny is going toward the actual, working budget, not, a year from delivery or a year from the production.
Right. Because I like you, I have a sales and marketing background, and I'm always thinking I'd like to make sure the film is successful, and a lot of times it feels like you can't be sure the distributor's gonna. No,
you're right.
You can't be sure the distributor's gonna have the film be in a position to do that. And the other thing is, if you can gather up a market for the film before it's released, so that the first, maybe it's only going to have a week in theaters or 2 weeks in theaters if it's really lucky, or you're going to do just like 2 or 3 little weeks, two or 3 weeks in 2 or 3 cities, or some tiny little theatrical release. But if you can actually put people into that audience, it makes it so that at least you look good on Rotten Tomatoes, because you're the one filling that audience as opposed to letting somebody else do it, which I think is a big thing. I've seen documentaries do that and be very successful, and they're usually not given credit for being very successful at all. And I think it's because what they did right was the marketing. So let me go ahead and do a quick check and see if we have some questions from people that we should answer, because I know your time is tight. I can't believe you're calling in from a set. That's just like the nicest thing, because I have to believe you're very busy out there. Actually, what film? You should tell us so we can all go see it. What film are you working on?
I'm working on a family film right now called Let There Be Light. Kevin Sorbo is the director. It's a smaller movie. So we're actually just getting started, so it's a good time.
Actually, the other thing I was going to ask you about, because it's something that you had mentioned to me, you actually do consult with filmmakers. So is it possible for a filmmaker to come and pay you a few $1,000s to sort of talk to you about what they plan to do and the order they plan to do things in, and you can advise them? Because I think that's another thing that people don't know how to get expert advice. And I don't know if that's something that, I think you'd mentioned that that's something that you might be willing to do under limited circumstances.
Yeah, no, it is something I do. Oh, absolutely. Cool.
So they would just approach you through they would just find you on LinkedIn.com, and they would say, and they would tell you, I have X amount of budget, and maybe you could help me out. They could ask for the kind of advice they want, and you guys can negotiate how the compensation would work.
Right, and typically they'll give me a snapshot of where they are and what they're working on, what the package looks like. Very cool. I can't tell you that. To start the conversation.
Yeah. I can't tell you, that's just a lifesaver. I mean, it can save years of time. So let's see. Do you ever actually, if somebody brings you a project and they'd like you to bring you on as UPM, is that something where they send you a query letter and they say, I'd like to bring you on as UPM, and this is how much money I have to work with you before we have funding, so that you can work on the day of, you or your team could work on the day of days and the
Absolutely. That's what I'm doing right now with Kevin Sorbo and his film. I'm down here acting as the UPM and a producer, and overseeing production with my team.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So basically, I tell people they should probably plan to have $10,000 to $20,000 at minimum to do the in hand, to the very minimum they need to have in order to start building the team that they need in order to start approaching distributors and create the paperwork that they need in terms of the LLC and all the other pieces. Is that sort of a good ballpark, or do you think they'd be better?
I mean, if you want to expedite things, $20,000, would allow you to get your legal in order. Get your budget, your schedule, and, potentially down payment for a casting director. I think it really would help expedite things.
Right. And they can reach out to you and they can say, so, and then they can reach out to you and they can say, okay, this is what I'd like to do. And then you can decide whether or not, you find the film interesting enough to come on as UPM, or whether or not you want to just sort of serve in a consulting capacity to tell them what to do next, because you can actually tell them how to find a UPM as well. Correct?
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Somebody wants to know, do you have a way that you look for, do you have a way that you look for casting directors? Or how, like, if you want to bring somebody onto a project like a casting director, you just have people that you already know that you work with in the past, or is it the case that you have how could you tell people how to find a good one?
Well, I mean, you can look at the type of talent you want. You can look at, a casting director that's recently cast an actor that you want is an interesting way to go. You can, depending on who the director is of the movie, they may have a relationship. The producers will have a relationship. I personally, work with a handful of different casting directors, but a lot of times, it's a kind of a collaborative decision of the team and who we think is best suited for the movie and the type of, level of actor we're going for, if that makes sense. So it's different every time. Typically, I have worked with some casting directors 4 or 5 times. Because a lot of this is relationship based, and you get a good value, or you trust someone will deliver for you. There's very high priced casting directors, and then there's casting directors that, once you're in and you know them, they'll give you a good favorable deal.
That's very cool. So, and actually, you mentioned when you fund a project and you'd like to have a completion bond, which basically means that a company that insures the project and says that no matter what, they guarantee that there's going to be a film, even if they have to replace the director, even if they have to replace the lead, even if the set burns down, if a storm comes in and it all sweeps out to sea, the completion bond will cover the fix. If you can't do that, then you actually will set up a series of protocols. So is it the case that if one of the films that you finance gets in trouble, do you actually deploy people? Do you and or your team go out and take the steps required to get the film back on track?
Right. Yeah, we have the right to in our legal. We have takeover rights if things go off the rails. But making sure and having approval on who the accountant is and who the line producer is extremely important. And getting the best you can get only helps you. Because that, outside of the bond, is kind of the insurance policy. Making sure you've got a competent veteran team that has a proven track record of delivering movies on time, on budget.
Right.
Those are really
new. You can be somebody new, but what you can do is put together a good team. So the issue is not, when you said you're looking for an experienced team, if you've got a new producer, but they have built themselves a really good team, then you feel comfortable working with that producer, because it's not just the guy at the top of the ticket that matters. It's actually the whole team that they were smart enough to put together that you look at, correct?
Right. You can be a first-time producer, a first-time director, but I think if you surround yourself with people that are, that have proven that they know what they're doing, that's only going to help expedite, your path.
Cool. And you mentioned that you're a UPM. I think a lot of people don't understand the DGA. So the DGA has DGA directors who are the guys that direct the talent, but they also have UPMs which are people who basically manage the entire production. So when you're looking for a UPM, when you're looking at a project, you're expecting to see a DGA UPM, which means they've entered the guild. And the guild says, yes, this person is competent to produce a film up to sort of a certain amount. Is that correct?
Yeah, I compare it to if the director is the architect, the UPM's the general contractor, and can help execute the vision and build it, and make sure that we have all the, they have all the pieces they need to be able to build their story, tell their story. If it's a DGA movie, you're required to have a UPM, that's from the Directors Guild, as well as a first AD and a second AD, and typically a second AD. So that's the DGA team. People say, well, we don't want to pay the union rates. Well, you kind of get what you pay for. A UPM is a DGA term. So if someone says they're a UPM, but they're not a member of the DGA, that doesn't make sense. A lot of times independent movies would just have a line producer, and that line producer, does all the work of a line producer and a UPM. Typically the line producer is in the office. And from my experience, and I have my favorite line producers that I work with, but, I bounce around. So I'm in the office, making sure I know what's going on in the office, and then I'm on set. So I'm kind of, all over the place. And, that could be it's a role of a producer. It's just on a guild movie. It's, you could have a UPM and you could have 3 or 4 more producers.
Do you ever serve as a line producer for a project? So let's somebody builds a team and they're producing a film, like they've done $2 and $3 and $4 million films. They're doing their first $11 million film, which is a lot more money to manage. you ever come on then as a line producer where you're supervising supervising the UPM and the production from a financial standpoint? Is that one of the things your company does, or you do, I should say?
No, I have my line producers that I work with. I typically, am involved. Line producers aren't typically involved in casting or involved in the elements outside of delivering, the budget on time and on budget. So it's very difficult to define because like the word producer, it's used so loosely, so it's hard to know who does what. But I like to work as a UPM and a producer, and then have a line producer that is in the office, tied to the computer, in the phone, and taking meetings in their office, and not leaving, not wandering on the set, because so much goes on. You need really good people quarterbacking that, that are focused only on that.
Right. Well, and I think
that makes sense.
It totally does, because the people don't. I don't think a lot of people realize that when you do state rebates and incentives, you actually have to track all of those costs. And it's not that you get 40. If you're going to a state that offers 30% rebates, it's not the case that 30 cents of every dollar you spend is going to come to you. It's going to be limited based upon the rules of that particular program. So
that's right. It's different everywhere.
Right. So the line producer is the one who ensures that you're keeping all of the documentation required, so that at the end of the shoot,
that's right,
it's easy to actually get paid by the state. Because states don't always have to be easy to work with. They didn't necessarily.
It can be very easy, or it can be a nightmare. And we like to go the easy route, and that just means more organization up front.
Exactly. And I think I don't think a lot of people understand that that's the line producer sort of traditional role. And it is true. Like, I know a lot of people who work on non-DGA projects, they're the line producer, but that's usually a $1 to $2 million project at the most. It's not the case that after that you usually don't have a DGA guy, partly because the unions are more comfortable. They like it better when the guy, DGA has rules. They train their people and everything. So there's an apprenticeship situation going on. So those kinds of things translate into safer sets, and they also translate into more compliance with the regulations when it comes to, when you're going to have the stunt guy, the stunt people on set, because you actually are doing stunts, and yes, it turns out we'd rather not have our actors get hurt. So I think that's all of the questions that we have. I'll do a quick look just to make sure that we don't have any others, and then I guess we should let you get back to shooting your project, because. Somebody asked, how do you raise the $10 to $20,000 required to basically start putting together a solid project? Do you have suggestions for that? I have ones that I usually make, but do you have ones that you suggest?
I mean, I think, typically your first movie or second movie, you're reaching out to your inner circle and talking to friends and family, and having people get behind your project, and be the initial seed investment.
Correct.
You can offer them, some type of return on their money when the film is delivered and you start recouping. You could tell them they'll be party to the collection account we talked about earlier, which may give them comfort. You could give them a point on the back end. A lot of times, a whole other conversation, but structuring a movie, you could offer them, a return on their money, and then give them maybe some ownership of the movie. Basically turn them into ways. Basically turn them into an equity investor, which is a dangerous. Your first equity investor. Right, but which of course requires that which regulation. That's why you want to use that money and get a good production attorney. And that's something not overpay for that production attorney. Right, and then when people are consulting with you, that's something that if they work with you, they describe their project, you can say, okay, so you need a production attorney, and he's already got the document set up because film investing is not like every other kind of business in the world. It has its own peculiarities, and so it's LLCs for that. I mean, like the Section 181, like there's weird tax things with films as well. Absolutely. Cool. Well, and, go ahead. Yep. I was going to say social media too, the Kickstarter and Indiegogo things. Those are interesting campaigns to get friends and family behind it. I think that's totally true. The only thing I would say is that I went to a Producers Guild conference recently, and
I ended up doing a whole bunch of meeting a whole bunch of producers, distributors. One of the things that the distributor said is, here's the thing, you have to understand, you can promise anything you want to Indiegogo or whatever, and you get the money, but you are not, under any circumstances, going to give anyone a DVD of anything and then expect me to buy it. That's not going to happen. So you have to be careful.
No, you can't give the movie away. Yeah, you can't give the movie away.
Right. But people think that they do that. It's a routine thing. It's when the movie's finished, I'll give you a copy of it. You can't do that because you won't be able to distribute the film after that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it hurts. That's right. That's right.
Right. You will. I mean, actually, I mentioned in passing, you if you go to distributor.com, distribber, you actually can, because you're basically distributing your own film, which you own all of the rights to through Amazon and iTunes and onto cable pay-per-view. But then you're becoming a distributor, which is okay, but it's just going to limit how much you earn, because it turns out you're probably not very good at being a distributor. And you could probably also sell the rights to that through rightstrade.com. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like RightsTrade is a platform that has buyers in 180 markets, and sales agents are actually using it. Sales agents are actually using it to reach buyers in countries all over the world. But again, you're becoming a distributor in that situation, and that's not something that's going to make it easy. Somebody who has that has raised their $20,000 and then comes to you to create their film, you're basically going to look at them and go, you know, when you said you were going to give them a copy of the film, you're going to do that in like the year 2050.
Exactly.
That's when they're getting their copy of the film. So just so you know, you should send them posters. Posters are good. Posters are fine. Signed posters even. So cool. Thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me. Do you want to let people know how they can reach out to you? I reached out to you initially through LinkedIn. Do you have a way that people can they contact you through your website, or how do you want them to?
Yeah, I think a really good way is probably by email. It's warren@producercapitalfund.com.
Cool. Very cool. And I'll with your permission, I'll go ahead. I'm going to be taking the. I recorded this, and with your permission, I'll go ahead and I'll edit it up, and I'll send it over to you to approve, and I'll go ahead and include that contact information in the video, so that people will be able to reach out to you going forward. And I'll make sure that people understand, and I think they will, that they shouldn't come to you and say, please help me make my movie for free. That when you come on board as a consultant, you're coming on board as a consultant, which is a person who gets paid and makes it possible for people to get something that would otherwise take a long time a lot faster.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Excellent.
Well, I thank you, Nancy. I appreciate it. Hopefully I was offered some helpful advice.
You were wonderful. Thank you so much. I think I think I've never heard a clearer presentation of how people work with somebody that's doing monetizing rebates, incentives, and minimum guarantees, or a better explanation of the development process that makes it possible to work with a company like that efficiently. So you were amazing.
Clear in an unclear business.
Yeah,
the concept, right?
It's a trackless waste. Excellent.
Great. Well, have a great evening.
You too. Thanks, man. I hope you have enjoy your show.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. And I hope you had an excellent evening. If you have questions, remember you can send them to nancy.fulton@yahoo.com. And when you get a chance, check out Nancy Fulton videos, because we've had several similar conversations like this one, and you'll find them listed up there. Not everyone gives exactly the same advice, and it's good to hear sort of multiple people talk, because it may give you options that you don't know you have. At any rate, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed doing these events, and I love it. I love hearing from people when they've made progress in their project or when they run into trouble. So anyway, thank you.